Good morning to my veterinary colleagues. This is Dr. Quincy Hawley, co-founder of Get MotiVETed. Welcome to our second episode of MotiVETed Mornings. On today's episode, I'll be interviewing our very own Get MotiVETed co-founder, Renee Machel, as she shares her story of going from compassion fatigue, anxiety, depression, and smoking to a life of thriving and well-being. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate your support. Our purpose at Get MotiVETed is to literally make poor veterinary well-being a thing of the past. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it. I hope you enjoy the show. I'm really excited to get into your story a little bit because I know, bits and pieces of your story. We've talked about this many times, but I'd like to go a little bit more in depth today with Renee Machel, our co-founder. And with that being said, just tell us a little bit about your story.
Yes, and it will be a little bit because my story is a little bit longer than yours. I have been in the veterinary profession for 15 years, growing up in Michigan and working at a small animal practice for 11 years, beginning in my teenage years, ending high school, into my college career, and into my early adulthood. And then from there I moved to North Carolina, where I spent 1 year at a practice before compassion fatigue hit me. In my early 20s, I had the biggest challenges with anxiety and depression while still attending school full-time and working full-time. And with that came medications.
How many medications were you taking?
I was on antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds daily, as needed anti-anxiety meds for panic attacks, pain management medication, sedatives to sleep. I was smoking.
Smoking on top of all that?
Yeah, at the time, yep. I started smoking very deliberately because I was looking for another coping mechanism, and that's what was there. That was what was at the fingertips. And smoking maybe like 3 cigarettes a day. So not like packs and packs a day, but still it was something that I had turned to as a mechanism to help me process. And so what I had now developed is what I'm trying to bring to people's fingertips, which are tools like mindfulness, meditation, yoga. And I originally started practicing yoga for the back pain, for managing chronic back pain. And over that time period, I was able to get rid of one medication. One by one, I would change things in my life, and one by one, a medication was no longer needed. And eventually, I quit smoking, and I have not smoked for 3 years, maybe 4 years at this point. And the medicines that I take are still short-term. So it's not something that I want for myself as a long-term viable solution because they weren't even solutions for me. I was still symptomatic. And the more research that I do, I realize that people who have anxiety or who have depression or who are in these states are still symptomatic with modern treatments. And so it was paramount that I find alternatives to living a lifestyle that was more conducive to a happier way of being. I had chronic back pain that was a problem, as well as GI issues, insomnia, all things that were, much like you, not terribly affecting my performance, but overall my quality of life. And when on the couple of occasions where it could affect my performance would be when I had panic attacks at work. And my leadership, luckily, we were really close. You know, we had worked together. Maybe at that time it wasn't for 11 years. Maybe at that time it was only for 10 years or 7 years. But they were able to recognize what was happening, because to me, I didn't know what was happening. And that was the first page of the book of anxiety for me, or, depression. And it was many years into that, after being medicated and going through therapy, that I had made a choice that it was no longer the way I wanted to live. I didn't necessarily know what I wanted or how I was even going to get there, but I simply knew it wasn't this. And I could tell you exactly what I didn't want, and it was that right then and there. I didn't want to be anxious. I didn't want to be depressed. I didn't want to be OCD, and I didn't want to be, always walking around with this elephant on my throat, in fear of the coffee pot. That's what anxiety sometimes feels like, is that there's not a saber-toothed tiger in front of you, but instead it's just you and all of the things that are in your mind. And so you have these, gremlins that haunt you at night and wake you up in the morning. I started researching and studying optimism and happiness and well-being, the psychology behind it, the science behind it, the neuroscience behind it, the mind-body connection. We talk a little about that in another episode, where I finally realized that yoga for me was helping more than just my body and my back pain. It was helping to still my mind, and it was helping provide the space that I needed in order to process what was going on in my mind and not simply react really negative to whatever event just happened. Instead, I could make a choice of how do I want to handle this? How is the best way to handle this? And I've just now began to see some of the really great benefits of that when dealing with big girl problems, like blended families. Or earlier in my 30s, I went through a divorce. And my best friend said, and she knew me in my 20s, she said, "Renee, you are handling this with grace." And I'm glad she thought so, because it made such a, there were times where it still felt like I was a mess, but I kind of knew I wasn't, because it just wasn't the same. And if she could recognize it, and it wasn't just me that recognized it, and she knew me in my lowest of lows, she knew what I was capable of and what I wasn't capable of. And so to have her recognize that growth, and other people who have met me along the way have been flabbergasted at the fact that I used to smoke or had anxiety. And in either regard, I can feel it. My life, the energy that I have, the way that I experience my life, the way that I feel about myself, the way that I feel about my life and what I've been able to make happen within my life has blossomed and blown up in such a way that was certainly not in the dreams.
So what was the turning point where you decided that it's not going to be anxiety medications and smoking, but it's going to be yoga? And why yoga and not bodybuilding? Mm-hmm. So where did yoga come from for you? Why did you want to move into that?
The yoga, like I said, originally it had come from managing back pain. Mm-hmm. And from the research I had done, it would support a really passive way toward strengthening my body. And it wasn't until much later that I decided that there was a mind-body connection. Mm. And that's within the past 5 years, I'd say, where I realized that a lot of the pain within my body was as a result of stress. But previous to that, when all of my tests would come up negative, no one still simply diagnosed me with chronic stress as being a physiological problem. It was my own connections that I realized that as things started to change, that I was able to notice the physiological changes. I wasn't in pain as much, and I wasn't as anxious. The yoga philosophies were understood and adapted the more I researched it, implemented it, and then it resonated. So I was able to, when I learned about certain yoga philosophies, I had already implemented them into my life, and it was almost validation.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until I went to be a yoga teacher, to certify as an instructor, because most of my practice was private and in home, because it was really just for me. And it was for healing, that I realized that there is more to this picture. It is bigger than me. And what I'm doing is more than what I'm even realizing that I'm achieving. You know, through working the body, I'm able to still the mind. And in doing that really deliberately, I'm able to then go outside of the body and say, okay, now we've got these circumstances that I'm able to have the space to make a choice of how I want to respond. And so for me, you know, through living it, through researching it, and through seeing how it's changed my life as well as other people's lives, I've been able to feel even better about bringing it more to the awareness of other people and outside of a drop-in studio. You know, the things that we practice with Get MotiVETed and through mindfulness and meditation are such deeper principles than the physical postures.
Yes. And so you had the smoking, anxiety, depression, tons of medications, and now you don't do any of that.
No medications. I take medication for neuropathy. I am working on that holistically as well. Again, still blending some research, but no smoking, no more sedatives. I have a supplement, regimen. I have a diet regimen. I have an exercise regimen. I have a balanced living regimen that I reassess all of the time, because anxiety and depression lurk very closely around my corners. So when things in my life, whether it be the energy that I'm putting out into certain avenues, or when circumstances outside of my control become a little bit tipsy-turvy, those things are very quick to try to grab a hold of me. And so for veterinary professionals, it's like managing allergies. You're going to have a multimodal approach to something that isn't going to go away. So you can still be an English Bulldog who lives in North Carolina, but you're going to have to put in some work and understand that at certain times, the scales are going to tip out of your favor. Sometimes you can't control it, but now we have things like Apoquel rather than prednisone. And we've got a multimodal approach to allergies. Whereas 15 years ago, we didn't have that to well-being. When we started this conversation of Get MotiVETed years ago, the question was started, the research is all there, that the profession is in need, but the solutions aren't there. And so for us, we had to go through it on our own, in the dark, for me for many, many years, for you for maybe a shorter period of time, but still very devastating. And thank goodness that both of us made it through. Because in any regard, with the things that we are dealing with, if we didn't make the choices, if something didn't spark our interests, the effect could be catastrophic.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. Now, do you think that, so you made a huge transformation from the maybe the stressed out teen and then 20-year-old to an individual in her early 30s that's thriving now. Do you believe that anyone, assuming no pre-existing mental or medical conditions, can achieve a life of well-being, even if they're going through compassion fatigue, burnout, and psychological distress, all these other things that members of the veterinary community are facing? Do you think that anyone can go from here to here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's an amazing question, and absolutely I think that you can. What I realized is that the research and the studies that I had done were of people who were at points in their life that I wanted to get to. And then there was a lot of self-study. So there was no person who emulated 100% what I wanted to be or even who I was. And so it was about creating the person that I wanted to be. And I was the only person that was going to create that. And so for me, it might have taken 10 years to get to that point, but now with that method in place, I believe it will help other people get to their best self and then live their best life in a much shorter period of time and overcome those challenges that we in the veterinary profession do face. And so whether it's on a Richter scale of 0 up to 10 for each one of those encounters, chances are you're going to feel that at some point in your career. And if you know what the tools are and you practice them, then they will support you if those come knocking on your door. And if they're already at your door, they'll help close that door. So if you are doing deliberate acts of mindfulness, developing personally and then professionally, absolutely you can create the life that you want, including managing things like anxiety, burnout, compassion fatigue.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that. Thank you very much for that. And is there anything else that you would like to share with all of our viewers before we wrap up this second episode of MotiVETed Mornings? Give everyone a good morning, just like go out and crush the rest of your day, the rest of your week. Give them your best.
Okay.
Like, what would you tell to someone who wasn't already sure that they were about to have an amazing day?
It's a choice.
Oh, wow, that's a good one.
It is a choice. Every minute of every day, and you can take it out from the big stuff. So if you want to say, I want to change my life, great. I want to change the year, I want to change the day, I want to change the hour. It is a choice, but you have to remind yourself and you have to choose not to smoke every minute that it comes up. You have to choose to love and not to dislike or hate. You have to choose to be the type of person that you want to be, and so that you can let the other stuff go. But it's not going to happen for you, and it's not going to be done for you. So you cannot put that on someone else. You can't put it out to the circumstances, because unless you create it, the environment won't support you. And so you have to make the choice for yourself to do that.
That's right. And what better way than by working on yourself, right? Working on yourself is the best way to manifest anything anything in your outside world. Change the inside world, you automatically change the outside world. That's been one of my greatest things that I've learned over the past few years. So with that being said, we thank you all so very much for tuning in to this episode of MotiVETed Mornings, and we truly hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and you will receive these videos. Every time we shoot these episodes, you'll get an automatic notification that we've recorded a new episode, and we just really appreciate your support, and we hope that we are providing some sort of value to you in your life.
That's right.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll catch you on the next one.